Welcome to Fort Macon, North Carolina's second state park, which was opened on May 1st, 1936. I've come to Fort Macon to learn about its history. This fort was used during the American Civil War and the Spanish-American War and even World War II. So let's go see what we can find. Fort Macon has a nice visitor center with models of film and other things that you can see, and we'll return to the visitor center at the end of the video. When you leave the visitor center, you will walk a path that takes you right by this Civil War cannon, and then you will go up the hill and then down into the fort. Now, first we're going to look around the fort, and then I'm going to tell you about the battle that took place here in 1862. Once you enter the fort, you will be on the parade ground, and surrounding the parade ground are 26 casemates. Many of these casemates have displays that tell you about the history of Fort Macon and how each of these casemates were used. This is one of the casemates. And in this casement, they've set up a display of the commissary. Within this casement at the fort, they have a display that shows a kitchen and a mess where the enlisted would have come to eat their dinners. Another casement is set up to tell the history of the construction of Fort Macon with displays of different materials and methods used to build the fort. What's really interesting is here at this display, they have all the different forts of the third series of forts listed on the wall behind me. That's amazing. I'd love to visit every one of these forts. This casement has a display of the enlisted quarters during the Civil War. Another casement had a display on the commandant's quarters during the Civil War. He had much better accommodations than the enlisted men did. They also had a casement that was dedicated to the Civil War history of Fort Macon, with quite a few interesting displays around the room. The next casement was set up as an armaments room, which showed you all the different kinds of weapons, shells, cannonballs, tools, and other things that they would have used during the Civil War. I found the guns in this room were fascinating. The next casement had displays from 1898 to 1946, and I particularly liked the magazine that was on display in this room, or right next to it, I should say. And as you looked around this room, you found many displays about life here at the fort. In the back of that casement, you could walk through a door into a room behind the magazine and see all of the different uniforms of the men that were stationed here at Fort Macon over the many years that it was used as a military installation. The displays continued in the next casement, which went from the Spanish-American War to the Civilian Conservation Corps, and finally ending up at World War II. Guarding against U-boats was one of the big duties here at Fort Macon during World War II. The last casement with a display in it was the World War II barracks. This was quite different from the Civil War era when you looked how they lived. And here at the corner of the fort, we have the bakery. This has been reconstructed because it was destroyed at a later period of the fort. But here the men would have used this big oven to bake the bread that they needed at the fort. This is the shot furnace where they would put cannonballs inside here and let them heat up. So if a ship came by, they could fire the cannonballs at the ship and hopefully set it on fire. But you can see how it comes, you put it in the one side and it comes out the other. Next, we went up the stairs to look at the guns that were on the wall of the fort. They have examples of Civil War guns, and you can see how they traverse around on these rails so you can aim the guns. And as you can see, these guns have a commanding view of the inlet that ships must sail to get in the harbor. I'm now on the outer wall of the fort, and you can see one of the Civil War guns there on the outer wall. And if we come up to the wall, you can see over the fort wall, which isn't very high, and see right down to the coast, and that it's simply a slow slope up to the fort. I'm walking up the slope on the outer wall, and you can see that the fort walls really aren't very far above the ground level outside the fort. This is the ditch between the two walls, and if you look over there, you can see defensive positions where they could fire into the ditch. And looking at the defenses down here, where they can set up cannons with grape shot and rifles and be able to hit anybody that's come into this ditch here and send them back. Plus, if you look down the wall, you can see there's more defenses at that end of the ditch, and we come across and you'll see more defenses at that end of the ditch. So you get lots of crossfire down here. All right, let's go inside one of these corner defensive positions. We can go from one room to another, and then you notice that it's bricked up at the end. None of these corner positions inside the ditch are connected, so an attacking force cannot capture one and run from one to the other. Inside this defensive position, you get a clear view of the entrance to the fort. This defensive position right here that goes to the ditch has a stairway that goes up to the outer wall. Brigadier General John G. Parke was sent to capture Fort Macon. He and his men captured Morehead City and Beaufort without any resistance, and then they moved to Broke Island, and in April they began to operate against Fort Macon. Now, Colonel Moses J. White and 400 North Carolina Confederates in the fort refused to surrender. Then on April 25, 1862, Parke's forces bombarded the fort. This bombardment continued for 11 hours. Then on April 26, the situation became desperate. Right behind this corner of the wall is the powder magazine that had the cracks in the wall near it. And everywhere on this wall that you see a different color brick is where the brick had been shot out by the Parrott rifles. And you can see that the damage extends down the wall with all the different colored brick. You can see this fort was not going to survive the bombardment, and so they had to surrender. If you look at the ceiling In this casement and some of the other casements near this point, you'll see a crack in the mortar and the bricks. This crack appeared during the shelling during the Civil War from Union artillery, Parrott rifles, and they had to surrender because this side of the fort was starting to collapse. And in this casement, right next to the one we were just in, you see this back wall. Behind that wall is the magazine of the fort, where gunpowder was stored. If they manage to knock this part of the wall down and a shell goes in there, the powder would explode and every man in the fort would have been killed. And in the next casement over, once again, that crack appears. And we can see another wall of the magazine that contained all that powder. Underneath these stairs is the powder magazine that they feared would explode. And to show just how close things were getting, if you look very careful on these stairs, you can see where a cannonball came rolling down the stairs after hitting the fort, making indents in every stair. Now going back to the visitor center, they have a lot of really great displays about the history of the fort and the people that were stationed here. They also have displays about the environment and the animals that live in the state park that you can see. Well, I hope you've enjoyed our visit to Fort Macon. I learned a lot about this fort, and I recommend coming here if you get a chance. So until next time, see ya.
Fire! Shoulder, arm. The noise, the smoke, and the sulfur smell. Right.